smelter here. Looking at an old hammer. Bought it at auction some years ago. And it looks like it was underground for a long time. It's really rusty, pitted. On the bottom says 4 plum or rum. No, it's got to be plum, P-L-U-M-B, USA. How do I know that's the bottom? Because the hole is smaller on this side than it is this side. You put a hammer handle in there, you want it to spread out and hold itself in there. So we're going to say this is the top. I need a blacksmith hammer. You can't just go down here to the local hardware store and find a decent handle. So our option is to make a handle. I'm sure I can wire brush this hammer and get it cleaned up. But it'll never be like new with all these deep pits in it. This thing's been underground for definitely for years. It didn't get this rusty laying on a shelf somewhere. It's definitely been underground. Once we get it cleaned up, we might be able to see some more markings on it, but I doubt it. It looks like there might be some markings right here on the side. We'll see what comes to the surface when we go to wire brushing. Right now we need a piece of hardwood or oak or something. I got my old walking stick out here. Made this a couple years ago. I'm going to use this to keep my balance, and we're going to take a stroll out around the barn and see if we can find a piece of wood or something we can make a handle out of. I'm going to bring my reciprocating saw up here in a couple of days. Cut me several sections out of this old tree. See if that wood won't be good enough to make some hammer handles out of. And if not, we'll have fun trying. That might be oak, I'm not sure. What else could it be? Persimmon? That'll work. What we have here is an old piece of probably oak, some kind of fairly hard wood. From out in the brush pile. It's been drying for a year or two. I don't know why I can't make me a hammer handle for that 4-pound hammer out of that. We get out the plane and plane it down, or maybe the angle grinder and sand it down. Looks like about that long would be handy. I could always make it longer and then shorten it if I don't like it, but I can't stretch it. Let's make it a tad longer. Yes, sir, Bob. We ought to be able to beat the snot out of something with that. Around a little bit today, cleaning up. I've got most of this junk cleaned off to start planning my combo workbench, work table, welding table, and blacksmith forge. I'll do some modifying, but hopefully we can use this cabinet and insert build my blacksmith forge right in there. We're going to have to cut this thin stuff out. Go with something thicker. I've already built my fan for the forced air. I thought about using propane. I like a coal-fired forge. My idea is to have the forge in there, and when it's not a forge, put the top on it and you got a welding table. This could be used as a vent hood. I could jack that up and make a vent and vent the fumes out of here to away from myself. I haven't ruled out that option. I ain't got any of the plans, it's all in my head. First things first. The next thing on my agenda is to make my hammer handle. Kind of cold today. I'm going back in, rest my weary bones. Well, we found our piece of wood for a hammer handle. Primitive peat. I'll share one of my stories with you briefly as I sit here contemplating how to do my hammer. I'm going to share the story with you of Primitive Pete. Who was Primitive Pete? I was. I had a shop teacher in high school. I took 3 years of machine shop from him. His name was Lewis. Might have been Frank Lewis. I can't remember his first name. He was an all-around outstanding teacher. Well, he was a fanatic on tools. He drilled us on the names of different tools, the uses and proper uses of tools, and he considered anybody. In fact, there was a little movie they showed us in school about Primitive Pete. Well, one day he saw me using a wrench. I don't know exactly what it was I did to get his dander up, but I wasn't using it for a wrench. I was hammering with it or something. He called a whole class together and wanted them to see a Primitive Pete, and that was me. He had an armband made up, put around my arm, had PP on it, Primitive Pete, like a shore patrol type armband. He made me wear that in school all day the next day. Wasn't allowed to take it off. So I went around Oak Alley High School with PP on my arm, and every Tom, Dick, and Harry want to know what PP was. Oh, I'm Primitive Pete now, didn't you know? But all in all, he turned out to be probably the best teacher I ever had as far as learning from him. He taught me how to weld. He taught me a lot about machinery. Think about him every once in a while. I made a bench one time and didn't sand it good. Not a bench, an end table. Didn't sand it good enough to suit him. He made me sand it all down, do it again. All right, let's call it a day. That's not much of a story, but I thought I'd share that with you. That's Pwalpar signing off.